Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next session of CME Palooza Spring 2021. I am Scott Kober, one of the co-producers of CME Palooza, and I would like to welcome you to this session entitled Two Truths and a Lie, an in-depth look at the new ACCME standards for integrity and independence in accredited continuing education. This session is sponsored by Hippocrates. And our moderator for this session is Cheryl Corey. Cheryl is the Director of Continuing Medical Education at the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. So before we get started with this session, as with all of our sessions, I would like to thank our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Med Learning Group, Physicians Education Resource, and Projects in Knowledge, our silver sponsors, Peer Audience, Academic CME, the Academy for Continued Healthcare Learning, Integrity CE, Hippocrates, and Platform Q Health Education. There they are, Platform Q. Our bronze sponsors, Antidote Education Company, PVI, CMEology, Haymarket Medical Education, Vindigo Medical Education, Medscape Education, RMEI Medical Education, Global Education Group, Real CME, Answers in CME, Helio CME, Creative Educational Concepts, Integritas Communications, Infograph Ed, Prova Education, DKB Med, CME Outfitters, Evolve Medical Education, Spire Learning, RedMed Ed, Foresight Learning, and Excalibur Medical Education. So there are two ways to ask questions during this and all of our CME Palooza sessions. You can use the Creative Educational Concepts text line to send in a question. The number is 267-666-0CME, 0263, or you can tweet your question to us using the CME Palooza hashtag. So we will be incorporating audience response questions during this presentation via the Peer Audience ARS system, which is Poll Everywhere. You can either download the Poll Everywhere app if you haven't done so already and join the presentation entitled CME Palooza 005, or you can type in the URL here at the bottom of the screen. As the audience response questions come up, you will see this information at the top of the questions as well. So please note during this session that the opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, its parent company, affiliates, or the ACCME. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Cheryl to introduce our panel and to get the session started.
Great, thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone to CME Palooza's Two Truths and a Lie on the new standards for integrity and independence for accredited continuing education. This is the game show style presentation where panelists and I will read a typical CME provider scenario, then 3 statements, 2 of them being true and 1 is false. It's your job to guess which one is the lie. If you haven't already done so, please download Poll Everywhere. Now, time to meet the panelists. First up is Amy Bernard. She's the Director of Accreditation and Compliance at Medscape Education. Her favorite game show is Jeopardy! Next, we have Jennifer Thompson, the Associate Director of Education at the American Academy of Dermatology. And her favorite game is Wheel of Fortune. Next is Tom Weber. Tom is the Associate Director of Continuing Medical Education at the University of Chicago. His favorite game show is Trust Your Luck. Our last panelist is Rokina Williams. Rokina is the e-learning program manager at Stanford Medicine Center for Continuing Medical Education. Her favorite game show, Celebrity Family Feud. And I'm your moderator for today, Cheryl Corey. My favorite game show is America Says. Now it's time to start our game. First scenario. A CME provider is updating their policies and procedures to transition to all the new ACCME standards for integrity and independence that will begin on January 1st, 2022. They compiled a list of the new definitions.
So ineligible companies are organizations that are not eligible for accreditation.
Mitigate The term mitigate replaces resolve in guidance related to relevant financial relationships to clarify that accredited providers are expected to mitigate the potential effect of these relationships on accredited continuing education.
Well, both those sound very suspicious to me. It is actually the new definition, eligible learners, and those are physicians that are actually eligible to receive CME credit. So now it's time to vote. Which is the lie?
So we're going to give everyone about 20 seconds with each of these questions to submit their guess. And then we will be showing all of the answers and the panel will be discussing the correct answer.
So most of you did guess correctly. The lie is C, eligible learners. This is not a term at all. There is an eligible organization, and those are organizations that are eligible to be accredited to the ACCME system. There's a whole list of complete terms on the ACCME website that they're using, so check those out. And then remember that it's January 1st, 2022 to implement the new standards. Okay, on to the next question.
All right, so this is standard 2, prevent commercial bias in marketing and accredited continuing education. Our scenario is that at a medical specialty society's annual meeting, a presenter is in an educational session, references cases from a medical atlas that he authored.
So which is the lie? Is it speakers can reference their textbooks during a presentation?
Well, this one is definitely true. The speaker also informs the audience that he has the books available to purchase right outside while they're at the conference.
No, guys, that's not right. To make it easier for attendees to purchase these books, we place the cell in the back of the room so that they can buy it at their convenience on the way out of the session. All right, let's go ahead and vote. Which one is the lie? A, B, or C?
Not B.
Which one is it?
Don't vote for B. Do you think I get 2 lies in a row?
All right.
Locking it in.
All right, so nice job, everyone. You are correct. Item C was the lie. So standard 2.1 states that the accredited provider must ensure that all decisions related to the planning, faculty selection, delivery, and evaluation of accredited education are made without the influence or involvement from the owners and employees of an ineligible company. So speakers are perfectly welcome to refer to text they authored when the content of that text is pertinent to their presentation. They can also inform the audience where to purchase the text as long as those comments aren't promotional at all. However, you are not permitted to sell textbooks within the session room or educational space. A more appropriate location would be in the exhibit hall or in a resource center outside of that session room. All right, moving on to our next scenario. Staying within standard 2, we have a scenario where an evaluation form for a grand round session, the provider asks the learners to evaluate their perception of bias in speaker presentations. Which one is our lie?
Well, I'm sure it's this one. Including a question on bias in the activity evaluation is an ACCME requirement.
Or is it B, the provider's policy is to use this as a mechanism to monitor relevant financial relationships in the grand rounds?
I don't know. That one sounds pretty suspicious to me. The truth is that the provider does review the results, and any speaker who receives a bias score of more than 5% has to attend a faculty training on how to provide balanced presentations, and then they have to have their content peer reviewed prior to their next presentation. So let's get to voting. Which one is the lie in this case? This was pretty hard. I think this was the hardest one so far.
I think so too.
All right, give it a couple more seconds. Okay.
Oh.
All right. So option A is the lie. So the crux of standard 2.2 is that accredited education must be free of marketing or sales of products or services. So this question is commonly used, providers very commonly use it to monitor relevant financial relationships in their activities. However, it is not required by ACCME. It is not a mechanism to mitigate, keyword mitigate, relevant financial relationships, and it is not evaluated by ACCME during the accreditation review. Providers are welcome to use the data gleaned from evaluation responses to these questions to determine whether their mitigation methods used prior to the activity were effective. I know my organization does this, but it is not a mechanism to mitigate relevant financial relationships. On to our next scenario. Staying in standard 2, standard 2.3. The scenario here is that a medical education company sets up a registration portal for the upcoming course. They take the following steps.
Well, the truth is that within the portal, all the attendees, they have the option of opting out of providing their contact information to any interested parties.
I think it's B. The medical education company has an internal policy of only sharing postal mailing addresses with ineligible companies and will not share phone or email if requested.
No, I have the truth. A few weeks later, an ineligible company B asked to purchase the list of the registrant. So the provider has to contact those registrants again and reconfirm that consent to share that contact information. All right, let's go ahead and vote. A, B, or C?
We should have a follow-up ARS question to identify the game show music that is being played.
Yeah, what's this one?
That will be the bonus round.
Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune, yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, is everybody locked in?
Hold on, give them another second or two.
All right.
All right, lock in the response. And
Oh.
Oh.
All right. Wow.
Wow.
So yeah. Option C is in fact the lie. So standard 2.3 requires providers to collect explicit consent, either through an opt-in or an opt-out from learners to share their information from ineligible companies. The provider only has to ask this once at the, for example, at the point of registration, but they don't have to do it repeatedly with each request. The ACCME does not dictate what type of information providers need to consent to, or learners need to consent to, such as email or phone or mailing address. That's up to the provider's internal policies to determine.
Okay, we're moving on to standard 3, which is identify, mitigate, and disclose relevant financial relationships. So we're going to start with standard 3.1, collecting information, and the scenario is, as an accredited provider, you're collecting information from prospective faculty on their financial relationships with eligible companies. Which one is the lie?
Well, I think A is the truth. Collect information about their financial relationships for the prior 24 months.
No, the truth is you only need to collect relevant financial relationships. Relevant is the key.
Oh, I remember Dion changing the rules. Disclosures do not include financial relationships of a spouse or partner anymore. All right, let's lock it in and vote.
Rokina trying to blame it on Dion.
Oh,
Is he watching?
I'm sure he is.
Throwing him under the
Not, it's
bus.
definitely going to go back to him.
Not fair at all.
Throwing him under the bus.
You're going to be on probation before you know it.
Right.
Stop. I think my boss is watching too.
So what song is this, Cheryl?
this is the match game.
The match game. That's right. Okay.
Okay. All right. And the majority chose B. You only need to collect relevant financial relationships, and that is the lie. So good for you. So to reiterate, we do need to collect information about all financial relationships that individuals have with ineligible companies, not only those that are just relevant. It's the accredited provider's responsibility then to determine which relationships are relevant. We know now with the new standards, we'll be collecting information about financial relationships for the prior 24 months. The current standards are 12 months. And the requirement, we no longer are required to collect financial information of a spouse or a partner. So you can stop doing that right now. Let's go to the next standard. Okay, standard 3. Now, because standard 3 is so long, we're going to take each component. So this one is going to look at identifying financial relationships. Here's the scenario. You identified a subject matter expert as a potential speaker for an upcoming accredited continuing education activity. Guess what? His disclosure reveals that not only him, but also his spouse, they're both employed by a pharmaceutical company, which manufactures asthma medications. The activity topic is about strategies for treating patients with chronic respiratory conditions. So truth or lie is going to be related to employees or owners of ineligible companies.
Oh my gosh, what a mess. The truth is he cannot be faculty and speak on treating patients with asthma, since obviously his presentation would be related to the business lines or products of his employer.
If you guys haven't figured out, Tom has a lot of the lies. So mine is the truth. He can be a speaker if the content he presents is limited to the basic science research. So I'm talking about like preclinical research, drug discovery.
They wouldn't give me the lie on my first turn. So he can participate as a technician to teach how and when to use a peak flow meter device and recommend on whom it should be used.
Okay,
so let's vote.
Go ahead and vote. Boy, this is a tough one, huh?
Yeah.
Things are getting personal too.
Well, we know who's a liar here. A good
Ganging
one.
up on me. Ganging up on me.
More match game.
Yes.
All right, give it another couple seconds. All right, locking it in.
Okay, let's see.
Ooh,
This was a hard one. Yeah. I think we need to talk about this. Absolutely. Split across the board, I would say. All three. All of you were great liars. Okay. The lie was actually C. That was the lie. So he can participate as a technician to teach how and when to use a peak flow meter device. That's fine. But he cannot recommend whom it should be used on or get into any of the clinical implications with patients. That's where the line is drawn. So let's back up a minute to the other responses as well. So standard 3.2 is very clear that we have to exclude employees as well as owners of ineligible companies. And so those individuals who are owners or employees must be excluded from controlling content or participating as a planner or a faculty in any type of accredited education. So as you know, the requirement for spouse and partner has been removed. We just talked about that, so that doesn't apply here. And there are 3 exceptions, though, that we want to dig into, right, to this exclusion, and that is employees or owners of employees of ineligible companies can participate as planners or faculty in these specific situations, and there's 3. The first is when the content of the activity is not related to the business lines or products of their employer or the company. And in this case, it was related, right? Because they were producing asthma medications, and it's about treating chronic conditions such as asthma, the content. So therefore, that would not apply. If we wanted it to apply, then they would have to be speaking about something that was not related, completely related to their business line. The second exception would be when the content of the accredited activity is limited to basic science research, such as preclinical research and drug discovery, or the methodologies of research, and they do not make any kind of care recommendations. So, and then the third exception, when they could be considered, would be if they participate as the technician, which we just went over, to teach the safe and proper use of the medical devices, period. So they have to limit what their scope is to just talking about how to use that device, and in this case, it would be the peak flow meter. So we hope that clarified it, and I hope that was enlightening. So let's take a look at another scenario for these standards.
Yeah, Amy, I think everyone just thinks Tom is the liar now. I think you're stamped with that, Tom.
I don't know. I thought Jennifer did a good job too of
right.
of fooling us. You're absolutely right. So the next standard is, we're talking about standard 3.4, which is we have collected all of this information, and now we need to decide how we're going to mitigate that financial relationship. So this scenario is focused on that. You've identified several individuals involved in planning of an accredited activity who happen to have relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies. So let's identify which one of these is a lie.
So everyone knows I'm not the liar, but A is relevant financial relationships of planners and faculty are mitigated in the same way.
Or relationships must be mitigated prior to the individuals assuming their roles.
I never lie except the last question. So the steps taken to mitigate relevant financial relationships must be documented.
Okay. All right.
So apparently just go ahead and vote for me. According to Cheryl, just vote for me.
A, B, or C, which one's the lie?
Who wants to be a millionaire?
That's right.
I would love to be a millionaire. Yeah.
Got it.
R.I.P. Regis.
All right. All right, give people another couple seconds.
Uh-huh.
All right, locking this one in. There are responses.
Okay. So we see that 71% chose A, 21% chose B, and 8% chose C. And the lie is A.
Well
Relevant
done.
financial relationships of planners and faculty are not mitigated the same way, and strategy should be appropriate to the role of the person has. So let's talk about that a little bit more so that we can get a consensus. We're talking about mitigating relevant financial relationships. So we want to take steps to do that, take steps to prevent all those with relevant financial relationships from inserting any kind of commercial bias into the content. We want to mitigate relationships prior to the individuals assuming their roles. We want to take steps appropriate to the role of the individual. For example, steps for planners will likely be different from that of faculty. And again, before the planning occurs, you want to be in determining what that mitigation strategy will be so that it can be implemented. This is, and then document the steps taken to mitigate the relevant financial relationships is the best practice, because if you need to be able to show evidence that indeed you have taken steps to mitigate. Let me see. We might have some questions about how do you mitigate planner what's the strategy for mitigating planner conflicts versus faculty mitigation. And I think the main difference is with the planner, they're more actively involved in development of the content. So you might consider someone such as a peer reviewer to review the planning decisions by persons without relevant financial relationships. So you don't want that peer reviewer to be having any kind of relationship. Or you could divest the financial relationship, which is most unlikely typically, and you might find other ways to do it. And for the faculty mitigation steps that you might take in that case, you still might use a peer reviewer, but they would be reviewing the content. Again, they would also be a person without any kind of relevant financial relationship. But they would, so that's kind of like the difference, and I'm hoping that's clear to help you along to understand the difference. Okay, let's go to the next standard or the next scenario. Is it standard 3 still?
Is this where we're taking a break? Yep, one more. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
This one. Okay. We have a lot of questions that have come in, so
sure. Okay, we're almost there, and then we'll pause for questions. Yes. So this is the next scenario, and now we're talking about standard 3.5. We've done identification. We've done mitigation, and now we're talking about disclosures of relevant financial relationships. So while planning an accredited continuing education virtual conference, you create a list of financial relationships to disclose to the learners for everyone who has the ability to control content. And let's take a look at the truths and the lies here of disclosure to the learners. What is it? What do the disclosures have to include? Here we go.
Okay, this is everybody knows the names of ineligible companies with which the individual has relationships.
The amount of money received from the ineligible company.
Or is it C, a statement that all relevant relationships have been mitigated? Go ahead and cast your vote now for the lie.
Okay, I'm kind of thinking they're gonna all get this one right.
Well, I didn't have one, so nobody's going to know.
It's D, Tom.
Still D, still Tom.
It'll be a right-in answer.
Pyramid?
Very good.
Oh, wow.
I think you're going to get that one.
Somebody's a game show guru over there, knowing all
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that. 96% identified the lie correctly, and 2% chose A, and 2% chose C. So let's just reinforce the fact that the dollar amount received is not a requirement to disclose to the learners. There are 4 required disclosures related to an individual's financial relationships with an ineligible company. Standard 3.5 is saying disclose all financial relationships or absence thereof about planners, faculty, and others in control of the content to learners. And don't forget your planners. A lot of people do forget to include the disclosure for the staff or planners who worked on an activity. So remember to do that. The disclosure to learners must include each of the following: the names of the individuals with relevant financial relationships. 2, the names of the ineligible company with which they have that relationship. And 3, the nature of the relationship, whether it's they're on the advisory board, or maybe they're a speaker for that particular ineligible company. And then 4 is the new part of the standard, and that is that we always need to include a statement that all relevant financial relationships have been mitigated. And of course, you want to make sure they have been mitigated, not just include the statement. And then just as a reminder, absence of relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies must also be disclosed if someone doesn't have any relationships. And the learners must receive these disclosures before engaging in the education. So it really needs to be in that front matter. So the new things for 3.5D is when disclosing those relationships, we have to include that statement about mitigation. And something else that's new is the exception for education that is non-clinical in nature, or where the learner group is in control of the content, such as spontaneous case conversations among peers or self-directed learning. That would be an exception where we do not have to provide disclosures. And this program is a great example where it's really not clinical in nature. So therefore, we're technically not required to have a disclosure. Okay, I think we might be at a good stopping point, Scott.
Perfect. And I just want to say, so all of the panelists are CME providers, and we're giving you kind of our expert opinions and scenarios and answers solely based on our own experiences and research. So just keep that in mind when asking questions. So go ahead, Scott.
So yeah, we've got a few questions, and so the one comment that I want to get to right away is someone has mentioned that that they love the speaker tells you why the answer is a lie. And I do want to mention, maybe we should have mentioned at the beginning, that after the session is over, we are going to be putting a resource in the archive of this specific session that not only has each question, but gives an explanation for why statements are true and why statements are lies. So if people want to kind of have a deeper dive, that is going to be available after the session is over. All right, so this is a question that came in on our CEC text line. Does exclusion of industry speakers significantly harm the ability to recruit expert faculty for innovative areas such as gene therapy or rare diseases where there are industry and academic partnerships, for example? Key opinion leaders move to industry more and more in these scenarios. So any thoughts?
Well, I'll get it started. Yeah, it's clear there. We're not saying that expertise is not appreciated in our field. What we're saying is that accredited continuing education is independent from any influence from commercial industry, and therefore it needs to be separated. But there's no question they provide a tremendous value in their knowledge and expertise and have a lot to contribute. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just because education may not be accredited, to follow up on what Amy said, doesn't mean it's not valuable and important information. So you can absolutely still have them come in and present. We just can't offer accreditation for that. And I just yesterday, in fact, I had to contact one of our faculty here and be like, okay, this one speaker is an employee of this company and they're speaking on products. So we can't accredit this talk, and the information is still good and valuable, but
right.
Okay, great. Well, here's another question. This came over Twitter. So the question is, how is it not promotional when an author tells an audience where to purchase his wares? So I think this goes back to the question about the speaker with a book to sell.
So the issue is they can sell their products at the activity as long as it's not exactly where the content is being held. So it cannot be in the room, as our example had, or it cannot be sold. If it's an enduring material, it cannot be a link on the PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a difference between what may be best practice versus what is compliance with the standards. I mean, because me personally, I wouldn't, one of the conferences that we accredit, I wouldn't want them there at all, probably. But, and our institution might make the decision not to have them there. But that is different from what the ACCME says is compliant.
I would also say this particular component, Standard 2.1, is the first time where ACCME has put a statement out about avoiding promotion from the podium for ineligible companies. So because there's nothing really, where within writing a textbook, we even have speakers who, because we work in dermatology, that they're producing products that are available over the counter and things like that, where they're providing a lot of information from the podium about a variety of products, and they're clearly available at CVS. And how do you? It gets to be a little bit more difficult with textbooks where we're not able to explain to our speakers why. So I agree. It's, a lot of people would then just say, okay, well, we're not going to have you speak. So that's a best practice that people could take for their content.
Okay, I'm going to throw one more question in. Now, if anybody who is wondering what the artwork is behind Jennifer, she had her daughter do a portrait of Derek and I. So I am the taller, more handsome one. Derek is obviously the shorter, stranger-looking gentleman. All right. So this is another question that came in over the CEC text line. Can you better clarify examples of mitigation ideas for planners versus faculty? This was unclear.
So at Northwestern, I'll just give you an example. We've been doing this for a couple of years already. We have, during the planning process, one of the steps, well, we have a CME review committee that looks at everything, but then we also have one of the planners who typically doesn't have financial relationships review the planning process and attest that the planning was done without any bias. And we have paperwork for that, so that it's just a little bit easier for us to keep track of that process. Mm-hmm. And then the actual content itself, we have, like for speakers, we have an actual content validation form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I recommend too, on ACCME's website, the tools that they have put out recently. There's a downloadable toolkit on identifying and mitigating disclosure of relevant financial relationships that has a side-by-side comparison of what to do for planners, what to do for faculty and others.
Right. Rokina brings up a great point, and it's an excellent resource. So definitely check it out. Check it out. Also, for a planner, they could recuse the person with that relationship from controlling aspects of the planning and the content for which they have that financial relationship. So they might not be involved in a portion of the planning that involves that relationship, but could be involved in the other parts of it. A faculty member, another way to mitigate the faculty might be just ensuring that they're adhering to clinical recommendations for evidence-based practice, making sure that that it's focused on peer-reviewed literature, adhering to evidence-based practice guidelines. That can also help to mitigate some of those. Others?
Did we say peer review of planning decisions? That's one that can be done. I don't know if we mentioned that or not.
Yes.
For planners. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Someone is suggesting that rulers on the knuckles are great for mitigating planners. So.
Oh, I like that. Rulers on the knuckles. Yes. Just remember that if you're using a peer reviewer, they need to be vetted too before you use them to ensure that they don't have relevant financial relationships.
Okay. Well, let's move to the next scenario. We still have some more questions coming in, which are great. And hopefully we'll have time at the end to address some of these.
All right. Well, it's my time to shine, finally. So I'm going to talk about Standard 4, which just happens to be the best standard. It's managing commercial support appropriately. So our first case, so you are accrediting an annual conference that is for primary care clinicians, and it helps them in the training of how to treat common orthopedic issues. So the planning committee has decided for the very first time they're going to accept commercial support. So which of these is the lie that you shouldn't do?
A, acceptance of this support will allow for lower registration fees across the board.
B, commercial support is disclosed to participants on a slide by the course director on that first break.
Or C, a major rehab center chain provides support on the condition that it is used to cover the honoraria and travel expenses for a nationally recognized speaker who is a subject matter expert.
All right, so let's get to voting.
Oh, I think this is a tough one too.
Yeah, and especially if your first time managing commercial support, because obviously there are some providers that that don't have commercial support at all, which certainly would make my life a lot easier. So there's a lot to take into consideration.
I don't know this one, Cheryl.
And this is a tough one. It's let's make a deal. Yeah.
Oh.
Wow. All right.
Oldie but a goodie.
Okay, give it another second or two. All right.
All right, so it looks like the majority said C and no one chose A. So as you can see, the answer is actually B. So this was meant to be a tough one. So B is the lie because of course you have to disclose any commercial support, but in this case, the commercial support was disclosed during the first break. So after some sessions had already taken place. You have to disclose the commercial support before the activity even starts. So that would definitely be non-compliant, and the ACCME would not be happy. So everyone knows that that A is the truth. Everyone bought that. But C is actually the truth. So that is goes back to the definition of eligible and ineligible. So a rehab center actually is an eligible company. So in this case, in this example, they would be partnering with you, with your organization, to present the contents. So it's totally fine for an eligible company to partner with you, like this rehab center. So so I know when I started, I was surprised at, as I was learning what is eligible and what isn't, that, a diagnostic testing company, diagnostic testing center is an eligible company. So, so important things to take into consideration. So let's move on to the next.
Tom, I was just going to mention something there too. I think it is kind of a tricky a trick question, because standard is about managing commercial support, and technically we're talking about someone who, an organization that's not a commercial entity, right? So that made it a little challenging.
Yeah, so you have to, so one important thing is you have to be able to identify who is an eligible company and who isn't. And that will tell you, because it actually is not commercial support in this case.
Right.
So, all right, so the next case. So you're accrediting a completely different activity. This one is much smaller. It's a simulation activity for 12 OBGYN clinicians on how to use ultrasound equipment appropriately. So an ineligible company agrees to provide the ultrasound machines for the training, and they're also going to provide an unrestricted monetary grant. So which of these is the lie?
Is it A, the commercial support is not disclosed to participants on site at the training? It is only disclosed to participants on a tab on the online registration site where all participants must go to pay their registration fee before the training.
Or is it B, you are successful in finding an additional company to provide ultrasound equipment for the training? Using equipment from only one company would result in commercial bias and be non-compliant with ACCME.
Oh no, it's definitely C. The planning committee provides scholarships for 2 residents, which covers their registration and their travel expenses when they get to fly. First class.
All right, so which one is the lie? Let's go ahead and submit your votes. There's a lot to think about in this one too.
And Scott, this is still Let's Make a Deal.
This must be the new Let's Make a Deal, because I would have known
maybe so.
old Let's Make a Deal music.
You think they're going to get this right?
Yeah, when you're dealing with equipment, that can be a little tricky too. So let's see how people responded. All right, so most people thought that B was the lie, and those folks were correct. So good job to those 58% of you. So why was B the lie? So there is nothing that the ACCME says that's saying that one ineligible company is not, that you have to have more than one ineligible company. So it may be best practice to try to do that. So if you are, so in this case, I know that there are multiple companies. There's GE, there's, can't think right off the top of my head, but there are multiple companies that make ultrasound equipment. So it may be best practice to get equipment from several of them, but it isn't required. And there's the classic example of the Da Vinci machine. That's made by one company. They're the only ones who make it. So it's not always possible to get equipment from more than one company. So and so A is the truth, because this one's a tough question as well. This is a tough statement as well. You can just disclose it on the registration website. Everyone has to see the registration website, so they couldn't come to the program and hand you a check. So in this case, for all 12 of the trainees, they're required to register online. So that's fine to do it that way. Again, is it best practice? That's up to you and your institution, but it's kosher as far as the ACCME goes. And most everyone didn't choose C, but it's totally fine to provide scholarships to residents. So, all right, so let's move on to the next question, next standard.
Yeah, so standard 5, this is the last of the new standards that were rolled out. And so we have 2 more scenarios before we go back to a Q&A with you all. So standard 5 is on manage auxiliary activities offered in conjunction with accredited continuing education. The scenario that we want to present to you today is you are accrediting a live activity format with both face-to-face and live streaming. This hybrid meeting will include an exhibit hall of ineligible companies posted concurrently during the accredited sessions.
Is it A, you plan to acknowledge and market ineligible companies outside of the educational space with printed and digital that does not include educational content?
Or is it B, you plan for the exhibiting to occur in a different room and Zoom URL to protect and separate the main educational space?
Oh, it's definitely C. You plan during a 30-minute break in the main educational space to allow one premier exhibitor a 15-minute non-accredited talk. You clearly labeled the break as non-accredited on the agenda, and you announced live to the learners that this session is non-accredited. Okay, go ahead and choose your lie.
Right.
Now, what song is this one?
This is still Let's Make a Deal.
Oh, okay.
So let's make a
It's a
deal.
really long theme song.
You ran out of choices.
Yeah, this is true. Even though there's so many new game shows, no one would guess what they are, though.
That's true.
Okay.
All right, give people another couple seconds.
This is drum roll, exciting.
All right, lock it in.
Here we go.
Okay,
Wow.
great job, everyone. Yeah, so the lie is option C with Amy. This is a lie because of standard 5.2a about timing, and it relates to the accredited provider ensuring that learners can easily distinguish between accredited education and other activities. I heard ACCME reference this as like the CME provider turning the light on and off. This new standards now specify that the non-accredited education and marketing type activities that are developed by or with the influence of the ineligible company must not occur in the educational space. So concurrent is not the issue. It's in the educational space. You have to have a 30-minute before or after window. And so that means that that 15-minute break was not enough time. There's other things that go into this guideline for standard 5.2 that made those other statements true. This is like activities that are part of the event but not accredited continuing education, clearly labeled and communicated to the learners. Learners must not be presented with marketing while engaged in accredited continuing education. What I'm talking about there is like click through, watch, listen to, presented with product promotion or product specific advertisement. You also have that educational materials that are part of the accredited education. This is slides, abstracts, disclosure information. They cannot contain any marketing produced for or by an eligible company, which that's been around, no logos, no trade names, no product group names. But one thing I do want to point out is that the information that is not considered educational content, that can include marketing by or for an ineligible company. Examples, schedules, logistical information. Okay, let's go to the next scenario. And this will be our final one, and we'll go to Q&A. You are accrediting an annual live conference and plan to convert the recordings into internet enduring materials. You have several ineligible companies that provide a commercial support and want to market it. What can those ineligible companies do with marketing?
Well, it's totally fine for them to distribute direct links to that accredited enduring activity via email.
And it's totally fine to print and hand out promotional materials such as brochures for the accredited education.
And it's also fine to email promotional materials for accredited education, such as save the date announcements that link to the registration page.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Bring it home.
Maybe this is a trick one and they're all true.
Go with your gut.
All right, getting a little slower for this one. We're almost there, everybody.
Push through. Let's get those answers locked in.
Yeah.
All right. And locked.
All right, great job. Yeah, you guys, this is fantastic. So the lie was option A with Tom, and let me explain why. Distributing a direct link to the accredited enduring activity via email, that's where that lie was. Ineligible companies may not provide access to or distribute, the key word is accredited education, so the actual content. The important item was that direct access. This would not meet the expectations for standard 5.3. I do want to point out, though, that distributing promotional materials for the accredited education, like save the dates, announcements, brochures, even providing a link to the general page, like a registration page, that is allowed by ACCME. All right, well, with that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl, and I think we go into Q&A.
Yeah, we're going to Q&A. Scott, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so we got a few. First of all, I do want to thank Pure Audience for their sponsorship of our audience response system. I think that's really added a lot to this session, and people seem to be enjoying it quite a bit. So one question that came in on the CEC text line, this is from an earlier discussion. Okay. Our busy and in-demand faculty have enough trouble remembering the last 12 months of their financial disclosure information. How can we possibly expect them to remember their financial disclosure information now from 24 months?
So one of your procedures can be that you could still collect the disclosures every 12 months and maybe even change the disclosure to have the date of when the disclosure or the relationship started. And so they'll have that on file, so they'll know 2 years from now they could drop it off. Mm-hmm. Any other suggestions?
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree. It's really about, it's a 24 look back. Mm-hmm. You can, I know at our institution, we are still going to ask for them to review, update the disclosure every time that they're appearing as a faculty or planning team member on there. So I think the key is to collect all the information and keep it frequent when you ask.
Yeah, that was one of the things that it's these changes are a good opportunity to review how your institution does things, because I had never really thought about that. There is no ACCME rule that a disclosure is good and valid for 12 months. That's not a rule. You just have to provide the relevant disclosures for 12 months. And I mean, I think we've all seen examples of, you know, in some spaces like oncology is one that's big, where the disclosure changes from during the whole planning process.
Right.
Where, you know, where a couple weeks before they will add on a consultancy with an ineligible company. So, so what's most important is that you always want to verify what those relevant financial relationships, all financial relationships are.
Right. And there's no set way of doing that. So I think the ACCME has great best practices and suggestions on their website, some of the tools that they provided with examples. You can collect it on as you say, an activity by activity basis, or you can collect it on an annual basis. You decide as a provider how you want to collect that information. You might want to consider adding a clause that should these relationships that they are attesting to change at any point during their involvement with developing an activity, that they notify somebody to let them know that that's changed. That's important too. It seems like the minute we get those disclosures and they're set, time passes and then it's changed. It's not always the same. So you want to be alert to that as well.
All right, great. Well, we had a lot of people commenting how they were really thrilled with how much preparation, how thorough this session was. So want to thank you guys all for putting so much work into this. And just as a reminder, probably sometime here the next 10 minutes, the slides and the explanations for each of these questions are going to be up on the CME Palooza archive and probably on our spring 2021 page as well. So for people watching this session, there is a brief survey on the live tab of the CME Palooza website. We only ask 4 questions that we use to kind of help for the future. And for those folks who want to view the next section, no need to refresh your browser anymore to view the next session. Just look on our live page and click the appropriate session link. It will start shortly. So with that, I would like to thank Cheryl and Amy and Tom and Jennifer and Rokina for all the time and effort they put into this fabulous session. And we will see everyone soon.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.